Welcome to Mic'd Up for Leadership, the podcast that gives you the tools to lead with confidence. I'm one of your hosts, Alex Dresen, and I'm joined by my good friend and colleague, Jourdan Hilaire. Jourdan, how are you doing today?
Hey, I'm doing well, Alex. I'm really doing well, man. Early morning. However, I'm feeling pretty good though. How about yourself?
Yeah, early morning, Jourdan. I'm happy that you were able to accommodate my tornado warning having city that just came through. We have weather affecting all of our recordings recently, haven't we?
I know, seriously, but I'm glad though that we're able to definitely make it happen though. So sometimes you just gotta pivot. Sometimes things don't go the way you plan, but I'm glad we're here though, and I'm glad you're safe as well.
Yeah. Thank you. I feel good. I feel good. I'm resting and ready to do this. You have an exciting topic this week to talk about. So yeah, let's dive into all the important things, Jordan.
For sure. But before that, though, I do want to ask you. I know that you had a big weekend this past weekend, completing a marathon. So, I want to make sure that we give a round of applause for you. Our listeners, please make sure that you definitely, applaud Alex for completing a marathon. But I'm just curious. Can you tell us a little bit about how was that? What type of marathon it was?
Yeah, for sure. Oh, I didn't know you were gonna bring up the marathon at all. I wasn't sure about that. No, I'm kidding. If I get this off over my headphones and all that, and not mess me up too much. No, thank you. I appreciate it. This was I mean, I've been a runner all my life, but never a distance runner, and so this was really a bucket list item for me. The Milwaukee Marathon, 26.2 miles, training in the cold for 4 months, and running through injuries. Honestly, I had a lot of different, muscle pulls, and my feet were in pain, and just a lot of different issues going on with that. But it was a near perfect weather condition, a little chilly, but I think it taught me a lot about discipline. The marathon taught me that training when you maybe don't want to, when you want to do just fun things with your friends or just hang out on the couch. It changed how I ate, how I slept, everything. But it was really cool to run through the city that I call home. Run through those streets. And what really got me going through at the end was a lot of positive self-talk, right? So you could tap into a lot of forms of motivation along the way. Like, I'm going to show this person, or I'm going to, do it for, whatever reason. But really, as I was running and on my last ounce of energy, I was able to run through my neighborhood in Bayview, Wisconsin, and I was able to point out, oh, that's the gym I train in. Oh, that's the coffee shop. Sometimes I do work and edit this podcast, and it really felt good to run to the finish line, run home, and shout out to Fear MKE, the run club I'm part of. Forget everything and run. They were a huge motivation. Shot off some confetti at mile 17.5, and so that was a lot of fun to give me an extra boost. But I would love to continue talking about this maybe throughout the episode, because I think you have an interesting topic today, Jourdan, that kind of weaves in some parts about the energy and the leadership lessons and whatnot that I kind of learned from this experience.
No, that's really awesome. I'm glad to hear that again. Congratulations on that achievement and opportunity. I could definitely tell there's a lot of leadership parallels with what you went through, especially when it comes to discipline and preparation, and resilience as well. So again, shout out to you, Alex.
I
Um,
appreciate that, Jourdan.
yeah, absolutely. You know, well, yes, like you mentioned, the topic that I definitely wanted to talk about today, it was definitely been on my heart for, I mean, I would say a few years now, especially, been working in higher ed for quite some time now and working directly with students. I've definitely noticed, that focus on titles over impact position. Well, I'll say more importantly, though, just that title position, right? Where a lot of students, are striving to, kind of get that title, right? Get that the president role or that leadership role in an organization or SGA, etc., right? And sometimes I've noticed that once they actually have that role, now they either don't know what to do with it, right? Or they're just happy that it's a checkbox on a resume, right? So it's really just about um, impact over position sometime, or when you have the position, what type of impact now are you going to create, right? And how do you go about that? So that's some things I want to talk about. Even honestly in my own personal life, I've had um, those type of feelings before, as a student leader, even as a young professional as well, thinking about the type of title that I want, whether that means I want to become a coordinator, a director, a dean, etc. One thing I definitely learned from one of my mentors, he talked about, it's not necessarily always about the title. Sometimes it is, right? Sometimes it can be, but more importantly, though, it's about the impact and the experiences that you gain from the positions that you're in, where it can help you open new doors in the future, right? Setting yourself up 5, 10 years down the road. So that's some things I've been thinking about.
I love those thoughts, and I think there's, oh my gosh, I think when I was looking at your show notes that you put together, I mean, we could put in, 3, 4, 5 part episode on this if we need to. And
Yeah.
we even are ready for, pausing this at part 1 if the conversation really gets into good depth and we haven't gotten to all of it. But Jourdan, you're right. How many times are people looking for a leadership position of some kind, just to put it on the resume, or getting a certain job title so that they can, get to the next step of their career? And I've been thinking about that too a little bit. How we're impacting people in our positions. How are we impacting people outside of having a position, right? What is our influence? Sometimes you do need to have a position in order to influence a group a certain way, because there's just a hierarchy going on, and it's a really a structured system. At the same time, you can practice leadership and practice influence in so many different positions, and so many different, and without a position, even just as part of an organization. And I think there's a lot to pull from that. Is there a specific area that you'd like to dive into here? I mean, I have so many thoughts and I'm ready to go. But I think just in general that this concept is really a really strong one for us to talk with our listeners.
No, absolutely. And, I think I definitely believe in organizational leadership, right? I do believe that it is necessary to have specific people in place, right? Or titles in place to help lead the charge in certain things, right? I do also believe in shared vision as well. I talk about that a lot, right? Be able to have multiple people at the table, whether that you are a president or a general member of an organization for 6 months to a year or more, right? Being able to actually talk through some challenges, some successes, some ideas, brainstorming, those type of conversation, I think is definitely important. But I really think about, I really want to talk right now about when you do have the position, right? Let's say you do hold the position of whatever that may look like, right? An RA, president of the SGA, president of the MPAC organization, right? Now you have it. What are you going to do with it now, right? What does that actually look like? And I start to think about, it goes back to organizational leadership, right? You need to make sure that now you have a team in place in order to actually set those goals, right? And actually execute them at the highest level that you can. Well, not you can, but your team can, right? So those are some things that I really think about because, like I said, I've definitely noticed where students take on certain titles, which is great. Like, congratulations, kudos. That's really important. I mean, you and I have had titles in undergrad and etc. But it's like now, okay, what are some of those responsibilities? How do we now elevate the organization, right, to the next level? How do we create a foundation, right? Especially if it's a new organization, right? Within maybe 0 to 2, 3, 4 years of existence. So it may not be as it may not be as popular as some other organizations. It may not be as strong as some other organizations. Strong meaning, there's systems in place, organizational structure in place. So now with this title, how do you create that structure, that foundation, so the next person that comes in, even 2, 3 years down the road, they can actually at least have, something to build off of, whether that looks like you know handbooks, transitional documents. That's one thing I definitely learned from you, back in our LSU days. And I was a professional, right? I was a young professional at that time, maybe like 2 years in at that point, maybe as a full-time professional. But I definitely learned that from you about, establishing those transitional documents, right? We talked about RHA because we knew that we're not going to be there forever, right? So it's important for the next group of RHA student leaders, but also for the advisors as well, like we were, to really help, move the organizational forward.
Oh my gosh, Jourdan, you spoke to my
I
heart
know,
there.
I know, it was a
Documents.
lot. That was a lot.
No, I appreciate all those thoughts. I love the idea, and it comes down to, ironically, a little bit of what we talked about last week: leaving an organization, leaving a place better than where you found it. Shout out garbage men out there,
Yes, right.
anyone who's doing cleaning efforts out there, the garbage man.
Absolutely.
But anyway,
Absolutely.
I do see, when you're committed to an organization, when you are, in that organization, in any leadership position, understanding how you connect in the mission, how your role is responsible for making a difference within that organization, within the community you serve, but bigger picture, what you can do beyond just those specific details of your role, right? So I've had, I've had some RA staffs before, and this, everyone has a similar role on an RA staff, right? The resident assistants are, over some sort of floor or community or building or what have you, and they come together, they share a duty rotation, they're, putting on events and whatnot. But when you get together for a staff meeting, the loudest voices, let's be honest, the extroverts usually are the ones that get hired, and because they're outgoing and they're really the ones that are in your face and getting people to build community within a floor. But we do need that balance, to have those more introverted folks or quieter folks that can bond with a lot of other people in a community. But I say that because I was reflecting on my time at Indiana State University, actually, and I had a couple RAs that came to mind where we had staff meetings and everyone was shouting out different ideas, or they thought they knew the best or what have you. But I remember Austin and Burford. I remember Saucy in the university apartments. And they were two folks that, I had great relationships with them one-on-one, but I knew that they were usually just sitting back in staff meetings. And they even said that, I'll speak when I need to. But I can remember two very specific meetings that I was part of where each of them spoke up and everyone stopped talking in the meeting and listened to them. Not in a, oh my gosh, they're speaking finally, but in a, oh, I respect them sort of way, because their actions led the way. They did their job the right way and they had great experience. And so they picked their spot and they were really able to influence some positive change or really explain what was going on in the community at that point in time. Not to speak to those details, but I was really proud of them. And I just know that, that leadership doesn't have to always be in your face, and that influence doesn't have to be a constant burn. It's about what you're doing behind the scenes, what you're doing when no one's watching. Honestly, even again, shout out to marathon training, putting in those miles, right? Going to those events with your residents, getting to know them one-on-one, helping understand the big picture, having some side conversations with team members in the organization. And when that, I don't want to say conflict comes up, but when that issue comes up that the organization needs to figure out, someone can really respond and surprise without having to have the title of president or vice president to jump into that conversation and lead the way. You can be a general member and just speak up for the first time. And if you're doing the right thing, people will notice and people will listen.
No, yeah, I completely agree, and I think about focus on that the general membership, right? Those students that are maybe introverted, right? Or they may not be introverted, but maybe they recognize at an early age, but within their position within that organization that there's maybe already too many extroverts in the room. So they already recognize when to take a step back, right? And allow others to lead or exercise their leadership capabilities, right? I've seen that even as a student leader where, there are definitely other students in the room that can definitely lead the charge, right? I've always told students that and professionals, you'd be surprised what a lot of these students are capable of. The ones that you don't really see often, like you said, in your face, shouting X, Y, and Z. But it's important though sometimes to recognize that, like you mentioned, general membership, those student leaders, they can do so much as well, making an impact without actually holding that title, right? Like you mentioned, showing up at the meetings, right? Showing up at the programs, helping out with the setup and the breakdown, right? Being able to actually share their opinions and ideas in those team meetings, right? For everybody to think about, because you never really know the type of experiences, life experiences, and organizational or professional experiences that some students may have, right? So that's why it's always important to make sure that you do your best to bring everybody to the table, because you never know what people can, the different skills and abilities people can bring to really elevate your organization.
I think about the crawfish boil that we did. I think our last year maybe at LSU,
Maybe.
and it was hugely successful, right? Like I think we probably had the most people we had in my time there, in our time there, and for some reason the garbage situation. I don't know why we keep going back to that, right? but the cleanup at the event, and it just we didn't have we had tons of volunteers, but I think some people were leaving their trays behind and whatnot. We just needed some people to step up and help. And, not only were we able to tap into some people because of the relationships we had, but I think about how we thanked them along the way as advisors and noticed them and appreciated that, and reinforced that positive behavior. I think that we have a very important role on campuses as advisors or professionals when we interact with students to reinforce when we see them doing something positive, to say they're doing something positive and to speak up on what that is. Now, does it have to be a handwritten thank you card? Maybe. Sometimes it's really cool to have the recognition be a little more formal, or write an OTM or whatever that might be.
OTM.
But even the set.
I haven't heard OTM in so long. Love it.
I have my OTM All-Star megaphone in here somewhere.
Of the month.
Yes. But I think about what we're doing to reinforce those specific behaviors we see and say how positive those are, and not grill them in the spotlight, but give them their recognition, because when they understand what they're doing naturally makes an impact on an organization, on an event, on other people, they're more likely to want to continue to do that because there's good that came from their actions. And sometimes they don't necessarily understand the full impact, or they may not understand what is innately driving them when they continue to consistently do that. That's why I love when we have conversations with students to help them with their identity and learn about themselves and the skills that they have. Whenever we can name that skill or that strength, if we want to go down the road of Clifton strengths, that's something that I really see so much benefit and positivity to helping them name and understand what they're doing in those moments to leverage their strengths and insert themselves into a conversation and lead from those strengths and those characteristics that bring them and the values that bring them so much fullness of who they are as a person and a leader. The more they leverage those strengths and those innate characteristics, the more that they're going to be able to set them up for success, as they go on their leadership journey in college, and as they set themselves up to build those NACE competencies and have a full resume, right? It's not going to be, I was 15 different positions. It's I made these 15 actions. Employers want to see the actions and the results of those actions on a resume and how they talk about those things in an interview. The positions on the resume can get you in the door, but if you're not able to speak to those experiences and what you did, you're not going to get the job. You're not going to get the next position because you're just a collector of titles at this point.
And sharing a position description.
Right.
No, absolutely. Instead of sharing outcomes. Absolutely. You know, the last thing I would say about this is, again, because there's so many different ways, you know, we can address this particular topic. But one thing last thing I would say would be, you know, I think that student leaders, with the ones with the titles, right, should really start to consider um, mentorship, right? Like, even though they may not see themselves, if you're a junior or a senior or just you have that title, it's important to be mindful that you're not going to hold this role forever, right? So it's important to make sure that you are being very intentional and purposeful of identifying the new wave of leaders within your organization, or maybe honestly outside your organization, right? That you can recruit, right? You can share about your organization. So, you know, maybe one day they would be prepared, comfortable, interested in maybe taking on those elevated positions, those roles, right? Because that goes back to creating that foundation, right? To be able to open doors for others. So it's definitely something I think that student leaders should definitely be mindful of, is that, you know, when you're having those titles, making sure that you're really making sure that those general members are not just sitting there and quiet and maybe attending meetings here and there, but if you actually signed up to be a part of this, hey, you know, delegate a task to them, right? Let's see what they do with it, you know. Let's see the type of creativity they can come up with, a new project or activity or program, etc. Give them a particular, you know, special project to see, you know, how they can complete it and who do they work with, and see how their personality may flourish from those different type of responsibilities. So, you know, being able to really identify and be very intentional of, you know, bringing along, opening new doors for I don't want to say the younger generation, because I mean, a freshman, a senior, but, you know, just those, you know, those new interested members in your organization, see how you can really develop them for the future as well.
Yeah, I love that. The more you know yourself, the more you can understand how you can impact an organization regardless of title.
Yeah.
The more that you can see that impact and how you can bring along people to set that culture. And ultimately, you know, legacy is something you were bringing up. I love that word. Shout out James Wallace for being someone who really instilled that in me in grad school. It's something that you want to build without trying to build it, and the legacy will come after the fact. But understanding that at the end of the day, that's your why, right? What's your why? What's your North Star? What are you trying to do in all of these roles in all of your life? What is the impact that you want to leave behind that others have felt along the way? So yeah, by doing things the right way and being able to step up, others will notice and you can mentor them along the way. And then us as professionals are the ones that need to help instill that confidence to be themselves and lean into those strengths.
No, absolutely, absolutely. Well, I know, look, we don't have a lot of time for our second segment, but I think that we'll just very briefly, if that's okay, just mention it.
Yeah, I think let's talk about it just for a little bit, and I think we should talk more about this topic in a full episode, whether it's the next one or bringing in a guest or something like that.
Absolutely, absolutely. No, we were just, you know, I think that, you know, the next segment would definitely be, you know, focus a lot more on burnout culture, you know, and overextending yourself. We talk about student leadership. We talk about, you know, executing programs at a high level, working with your team, being able to create a strong foundation and bringing others along, right, on that journey of discovery, organizational discovery, self-discovery, etc. But, you know, sometimes, you know, by doing all of that, especially if you're trying to do it by yourself, there's you know, burnout can happen, right? Whether that looks like mental fatigue, loss of motivation, saying yes too often, right? So those are some things that we're definitely going to, you know, highlight in the next episode for sure.
Yeah, definitely. I have, you know, I want to say this before it's just kind of set it up for myself. If we're going to keep the marathon thoughts maybe into one episode, perhaps.
Right.
But I really do think that what I experienced, I was very intentional that I couldn't burn out. And so I had to say no to a lot of different things to say yes to this marathon experience. And that includes with this podcast, Jourdan, right? Like they were things that, I really wanted to dive in and do some new cute editing tricks and some, and I did a couple things, right? Shout out a camera on a garbage picker, but there's some things that really I realized my fuel gauge was running kind of low. And there's even things I've sprinkled in before and wanted to talk about how, we want to do some leadership training sessions, right? Some of the Clifton Strengths coaching that I've done, or even, developing resources for these leaders and whatnot. And I just realized that these good ideas had to be on the shelf so that my best energy could be put towards the marathon. So honestly, I'm recovering. I think my Garmin watch said I had 4 hours left until full recovery from the marathon. So by midday today, I tell you, I'm going to be really excited to start to dive into some of this more again, and sharing with the listeners how we can make an impact on your campus or with your students or with professionals and whatnot. There's a lot of wonderful things that have come from this podcast, connections we're making and things we want to do, but you can't do it from, an empty cup, like you're saying, right? Like you can't do it once you're burned out. It takes too long to recover. So there's some intentionality that we've been doing with this, but there's been so many great conversations along the way to still keep this fire going and talk with you every single week, Jourdan. It's been a pleasure to be able to have these conversations, building up the podcast, to actually record and put these into Spotify, Apple, YouTube, Instagram, all the spots that we post this. And I'm really excited to talk about, how you can lead when you are nearing that burnout, or just too excited to put all your things into too many different efforts, or even to one effort. So I appreciate giving me a little space to share that. So next time we can really talk about the nuts and bolts of what it means to lead when you're at that burnout stage.
Absolutely. No, I appreciate that. And I guess one thing I'll just, leave for our listeners is one thing one challenge, right? I will leave for our listeners is sometime within the next 7 days, right? 1 week, next 7 days, by next Wednesday, try to find an opportunity to create for others. Try to find an opportunity to create for others. So that is one thing I'll definitely leave for our listeners. And always be mindful of, it's not always about titles, but it's about the impact that you make without it and with it.
I love that, Jourdan. I love our conversations, and I'm excited to have the next one and really start to find a way that we can bridge that impact without having a title in your organization, right? We're going to find ways to really help influence the leadership community and mic them up to share the big, great things that they're doing. So until that next time, thank you for listening. We're excited to communicate with you in the future. But until that next episode drops, my name's Alex.
I'm Jourdan.
We'll see you in the next one. Take care.